There have been a lot of questions and a lot of noise about cannabis being rescheduled from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. I wanted to cut through some of that. I've had a lot of firefighters ask us, does this change drug testing? Will a medical cannabis card protect me? How does the IFF work? What ultimately ends up happening to me as a firefighter after the scheduling has changed? I'm John. I'm the founder of Rescue One CBD. We're going to be talking a little bit about how that affects you, where the policy shift is going to be happening, and whether or not this rescheduling actually affects firefighters at the ground level just yet. I have my computer in front of me, so I'll be kind of referencing a lot of stuff because there's a ton of information to go over. So if you see me keep looking over this way, that's kind of what's going on. All right, so I want to break this down very clearly based on how courts, attorneys general, DOT rules, and fire departments actually would view this and rule, not kind of like internet rumors. So I'm just referencing a lot of info here. Just a quick summary of what the executive order that President Trump signed on Thursday, the 18th, actually did. Marijuana or cannabis was rescheduled from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. That means that it's acknowledged for medical use. It's easier to research. It opens up some tax benefits for cannabis companies, and it opens up banking opportunities for cannabis companies that they didn't have before. So what it did not do is it did not legalize it federally. It did not change DOT drug testing, and it doesn't override your union contract or your department policy. The rescheduling changes federal drug classification. It does not change your workplace rules. Fire service cases, in the last couple of years have gotten kind of confusing. So people think like once the scheduling changed that it would open up the ability to use cannabis off duty. But, when we look at the cases in Hillsborough County, Florida, Buffalo, New York, and FDNY, the ones that are like more commonly referenced, especially by us, they all had a similar thing. They didn't win those cases because THC was legal or even rescheduled. They won it on procedural and contractual and policy grounds. So they already had a screw up with their policy. They failed the THC drug test, and then they were able to fight it in court. Now, whether you know about those or you don't, the point is there were specific cases that happened where they could fight their job loss after they got terminated for a failed THC drug test. They could fight those cases based on a bunch of stuff around their policy legally that they could prove they were fired, for a poor reason, like they weren't intoxicated at work, their THC policy wasn't clear enough. And after all that, they were fighting to get their job back, and they ended up doing so and causing a policy change after. So I bring those up to say, like, hey, you can see these other departments, they had these issues because of policy, not because THC was scheduled in any way, shape, or form over there. So those are like separate things. DOT drug testing is status based, not legality based. Now, I'm not a lawyer. None of this is legal advice, but between reading a lot of this stuff, talking with policy experts, and then also just doing my own Googling and trying to read a lot of this, I'm just going to be, referencing a lot of this information kind of in one spot. So DOT drug testing doesn't care whether marijuana is legal or prescribed. It only asks one question: is the substance present in your body while you're in a safety sensitive role, right? Because DOT is basically just all trying to establish is your impairment a public safety issue. Medical marijuana cards don't override the DOT rule. They don't excuse a positive test. So you can still be 100% legal and 100% non-compliant, if that makes sense. Even in states where marijuana is completely legal recreationally, the DOT says you cannot have it in your system. That's the hard part. So the question that some firefighters posed was, will it stay in DOT testing guidelines even with a medical card? Yes, nothing changes. DOT rules are federal safety regulations. Schedule 3 is not approved for safety sensitive work. Schedule 3 is ketamine. Can't use ketamine while you're on duty. The question here is going to come up, which I'll get to in a minute. What happens off duty? If you're in a DOT covered role, a card won't protect you. Another question that was posed was, will this impact drug testing within the fire service? Indirectly, it might, but not immediately. So the schedule doesn't go down and say, okay, at Schedule 3, all fire departments in the IFF need to change their policy to allow drug testing, standards to change. It doesn't do that, but it does create a framework that departments on their own can look at policy and say, this now is approved for medical use, right? Schedule 1 means there's no medical use to it. It's the same as heroin. Schedule 3 says there is medical use, but it has to be prescribed and it needs to be an actual medication. Could departments, this is where speculation comes in, could departments look at it and say, all right, it's not Schedule 1 anymore, it's Schedule 3. Could we maybe allow our members to use this with a card? That's up to them. But it wouldn't be this big taboo thing anymore. It kind of takes some of the sting out of it to say, this isn't Schedule 1 anymore. Obviously, even the DEA says, hey, this is approved for medical use, maybe this is now a conversation between a doctor and a patient instead of a fire chief and a firefighter, right? A union contract is allowed to be stricter than federal law. The courts uphold that, but if they wanted to, and a union made a good case, or a fire chief or city councilors were okay with it, then they could reschedule those. I mean, think about Pittsburgh, guys. Pittsburgh has had medical cannabis for years. It's technically Schedule 1 at the time, but because their city allowed that to be written in and it was also legal in the state, they were able to do it. So the contract can flux, around with state law, as we've seen, but it's really just, does the policy want to change based on what the scheduling is? The scheduling might make policy change more easy, is I guess what I'm getting at. One firefighter asked, when will the IFF become cannabis friendly? This is total speculation. No idea. If they do, it will be very slowly and it'll be carefully. I believe the IFF's biggest concern is, if I was to guess, I don't want to speak for anybody at that high level, but I would guess their biggest concern would be how the benefits are going to be affected if you are killed in the line of duty. The PSOB, it states you get a line of duty death, public safety officer's bill. I have to double check that, but PSOB states if you are killed in line of duty, you get a paid out death benefit. IFF is really concerned that if you have THC in your system, there could be a case that says you were neglecting your responsibility to be sober, right, on duty. And there isn't anything in there specifically about THC from what I've seen, but any violation of what they would consider the Drug Free Workplace Act, or even like taking, alcohol, it shows that if you had any potential for being intoxicated, then they could not give that death benefit payout. Changing that schedule from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 doesn't change that wording in the PSOB. So it would just have to be a case that would be made. Was this person intoxicated at work or not? It muddies the waters a little bit. If I was to assume the IFF would get behind cannabis, it would be after that language is really clear in the PSOB, maybe, right? And then the other one would be if there was more of a national push to say this needs to, like medical research show that there was some big benefit that firefighters would get, whether it's from cancer, PTSD, some kind of medical benefit that firefighters should be getting. And it would be irresponsible of the IFF to not advocate for it for us. Now, we could all argue one way or the other that medical cannabis could be or could not be beneficial for firefighters. It's hard to say until there's, like a lot more research to show a direct link and help. In my opinion, enough of that is kind of already there, and this should be a conversation between the doctor and patient. But I'm not speaking for the IFF. From their standpoint, I would assume they would need a little more research to show things like pain relief, which I think that's pretty clear. The benefits of PTSD or maybe even anxiety for specific narrow cases, just like any other medication. The cases that happened in prior fire departments where people lost their job, but got them back after they were using a medical marijuana card. They had, I'll take Hillsborough County, for example, they had a disability under a protected medical condition, right? In the case of this firefighter from Hillsborough County, Florida, it might have been PTSD, but I believe it was a sleep issue. His physician prescribed him a medical marijuana card. He was using it as directed off duty, and he was terminated after he failed a drug test for THC. He got his job back because they proved he was not intoxicated on duty. Drug Free Workplace Act does not state what you can do off duty. It says you can't be intoxicated at work. That kind of opened up the door to say, like, well, firefighters are allowed to work with certain medical disability. We hear disability and we think, like, I can't walk anymore, I can't function as a firefighter. But there are protected class disabilities like insomnia, PTSD, where people can technically still be physically and mentally capable of working. They just have issues that they have a medication for. And if that's the case, there is these sections of the policy where departments can look and say, in those cases, someone is allowed to work as a firefighter if they have a medical marijuana card and they're treating those cases. This is kind of where I see like it's starting, where these little niches of things would happen and policy could expand out from there. But again, it has to be done by the department. This changing of schedule doesn't directly allow us to do anything. It allows more conversation to happen, the labor management side from the department or the union to talk with policymakers and say, it's not Schedule 1 anymore. Could we maybe do more with this? In these niche cases, firefighters are protected medical disabilities. Maybe we can allow THC use for those things. And I keep saying THC use, but I mean, a lot of use cases for THC prescriptions have high CBD content for a lot of different reasons. I mean, inflammation and sleep being the biggest proponents of CBD, where pain relief and maybe some anxiety relief is known on the THC side. So a lot of people think THC is good for sleep. It's not. It disrupts REM, especially when you use it chronically. And this has been proven time and time again. A lot of old timers will tell you, like, oh, I used to smoke cannabis all the time in the 60s and 70s, put me right to bed. You don't know what you're talking about. Go ahead and look up the THC content difference between cannabis and then and now. And you'll see that cannabis back then was almost what hemp is now. It's gotten so much stronger. You know, they were ingesting high amounts of CBD. They didn't even know it. No, nobody even knew what CBD was in the 60s and 70s. Been there the whole time. The last thing, you know, I wanted to talk about is how this affects Rescue One. Our business does not get affected neither by this rescheduling or the recent hemp ban. And I'll just take a second to talk about the hemp ban. The hemp ban is not a hemp ban. It's a THC ban. The federal government has signed the Farm Bill, the agriculture bill, the newest version of it. During the government shutdown, they put in rules to state, hey, THC can't come from hemp and be put in food items in large amounts anymore. The hemp industry was using a loophole that was allowing them to pull pretty significant amounts of Delta 9 THC out of hemp because there's only 0.3% in the flower allowed. But if you take a lot of flowers, you can make a lot of THC out of it. They were using a loophole to be able to take the same THC that would get you high from marijuana out of hemp. They were able to take it and put it into things like beverages, make cartridges out of it to vape and all of this crazy stuff. And then when they started cracking down on it, they started making synthetic THC or Delta 8 THC, where they were able to use it just like marijuana, but nobody could stop them because it wasn't technically illegal. With all of that being said, I think a lot of state legislators, governors like Governor DeSantis going one way, allowing, you know, Delta 8 use in everything. Governor Newsom in California doing the exact opposite, saying we're going to ban all amounts of THC from CBD. If you want THC, go to a dispensary. And that fight started happening a lot more. It got a congressional attention. People were putting pressure on them to say, hey, close this loophole. So they did. A lot of news headlines are trying to say the hemp industry is getting killed because of this bill. And that's true, but that's only because the hemp industry has kind of just become more of the THC industry. Cannabis companies have to follow rules, they have to follow regulations. They can't have banking, they can't have tax benefits and insurance like the hemp industry can. And yet the hemp industry basically just broke all or cut all the corners and was able to use a bunch of THC where the marijuana industry couldn't. And so all the stuff that applies to the cannabis industry never applied to the hemp industry, even though they were selling almost the same product. So the marijuana industry was pretty pissed. I understand why. This congressional bill kind of made it a clear delineation. Hemp is hemp. There shouldn't be any THC in it. If you want THC, you're going to have to go to a dispensary or get a card. It also kind of helped the marijuana industry as well with this rescheduling. And they kind of evened the playing ground, I think, for both, which is really nice. A lot of people that are complaining about it being killed are honestly just either they're afraid of the hemp industry being upended because they're tied to it, whether they're in it or sell for it, or it's a politically motivated. They just didn't like whatever, you know, the Congress was doing, and they're saying this is stupid. But it doesn't actually kill hemp; it kills THC. It's just because the hemp industry has become such a big producer of THC, synthetic or otherwise, that 90% of the hemp industry is basically just selling THC now, and it's going to shut those companies down. So it's not that the hemp industry is going away. Just to close and kind of wrap it all up, you know, you can always send us more questions if you'd like. Support at rescue1cbd.com. Message us on Instagram or any of our social channels. We do love to talk more about this stuff. You know, if you really are concerned about how this will apply to you, or you're a union officer, or you're a chief or a policymaker, and you're looking at how this is going to change, my suggestion is get with labor management and get with your union attorneys, city attorneys, and say, knowing what we know, this is basically now a medication, right? By the letter of the law and the DEA. Starting in May of 2026, how can we get ahead of this, and what can we assume would happen if somebody had a card and failed the drug test? Because you shouldn't look at it anymore as what policy the city currently has and how you can affect discipline. You should look at it as our policy was written at a time before this was scheduled, and could this person have a case if they went to sue us, the department or the city or the county? Could this firefighter have a case if they went to sue us saying, hey, I'm allowed to take this and your policy is outdated? Because they probably do have a significant case, whether it upheld or not, I don't know, but I'm not a lawyer. But departments need to really consider, changing that policy to effectively treat it like a medication that it is. The hard part is drug testing. Like, when do we know that person took it or not? My suggestion would be call departments in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. I know a lot of those places have a combination of oral fluid and blood, and they'll try to determine from their best estimation when the last level of intoxication was. It's still not a settled technique, but it's closer than urine testing, because urine is just unreliable in determining how long ago that person ingested THC. It's going to be a little bit of turbulent water for a bit, and people have to kind of assume that their department is not going to be the first to undertake it. The places that are the first will be kind of the breeding ground and the training ground to look at and to say, how do these people handle it, and what can we learn from them? What can we do, to kind of implement that in the same way? And if you're a firefighter or union officer, you have to approach your department with some of this knowledge and say, knowing that this schedule has changed, we believe that it should be affected in our policy. And we believe that regardless of how drug testing is, cannabis use needs to be allowed in these cases, or whatever else. I'm not proponent of recreational use. I think it needs to be treated as a medication, and I think people need to understand that a doctor has to talk to a patient about it. There are cases where it can be worse for you, and without any kind of educated medical professional on your side evaluating your history and looking at that kind of stuff, then you're kind of shooting in the dark. I mean, which you wouldn't want to do with any medication, especially when that's intoxicating. Please do exactly that. We like to help wherever we can. We can't write policy. We can help. We can make suggestions. We can show you kind of what other departments have done. We can give you our experience on drug testing. We're the only CBD company that's been tested by 2 universities to show no failed drug tests on firefighters, because our CBD is made with an ultra refined process to take all the THC out. So, in our narrow scope of things, we have some experience with kind of understanding the process of drug testing, so we can help with that stuff. But ultimately, you just have to sit down with your city attorneys and really determine what the best course of action for your department is. I hope this stuff helps. If you have any questions, or you want me to follow up on anything, or expand on anything, just let us know in the comments or shoot us a message or an email. Support at rescue1cbd.com. Check our website out for additional information. We've written stuff at Crackle Magazine and for fire engineering and others. If you got a lot out of this, please like and share, and let us know of anything else we can help with. Take care of each other. Be safe out there.